The auditorium was already buzzing with applause and camera flashes when a man in a faded blue janitor's uniform slipped quietly through the side doors. He kept his head down, as if hoping the noise wouldn't notice him. His hands were rough, his shoes scuffed, and his shoulders carried the tired curve of someone who had spent years cleaning up after others. He found an empty seat near the back, close enough to see the stage but far enough to remain invisible. What no one knew, what no one could have guessed, was that before this ceremony ended, an entire room would fall silent because of him. And before this story is over, you might find yourself holding back tears, wondering how many heroes walk past us every day unnoticed. If stories like this move your heart, take a moment to like the video and subscribe to the channel, because sometimes the quietest stories are the ones that stay with us the longest. His name was Daniel Reyes, and for the last 16 years, his world had revolved around one boy, his son, Lucas. Daniel had woken up before sunrise every morning to scrub floors at the local high school, the same building where his son had studied, laughed, struggled, and grown. He never told Lucas how many nights he went to bed hungry so his son could eat, or how many extra shifts he took to make sure Lucas had books, shoes, and a future bigger than the one Daniel thought he deserved. Lucas knew his father was a janitor, and Daniel never felt ashamed of that. What he felt ashamed of was how often he couldn't give his son more. As Daniel sat there, the graduation ceremony unfolded like a dream he was afraid might end if he blinked too hard. Names were called, families cheered, and pride filled the air. When Lucas's name was announced, Daniel stood just enough to see over the heads in front of him. His hands trembled as he clapped, eyes burning with tears he refused to let fall. Lucas walked across the stage with confidence, a confidence Daniel had spent years trying to build in him through late-night talks, cheap takeout dinners, and quiet encouragement when life felt unfair. What Daniel didn't notice was the Navy captain seated in the front row, a man with silver hair, a crisp uniform, and eyes trained to observe details others missed. Captain Jonathan Hale had been invited as a guest speaker, there to talk about discipline, service, and the future. As he listened politely and waited for his turn, his gaze drifted across the audience, and then it stopped. His eyes locked onto the back row, onto the janitor standing awkwardly with his hands clasped together. On Daniel's forearm, partially hidden by his sleeve, was a tattoo. Old, faded, but unmistakable. Captain Hale's breath caught in his throat. It was an insignia he had not seen in decades, one that carried memories of fire, sacrifice, and brothers who never came home. His heart began to race as scenes from another life flooded back. Mud-soaked boots, radio static, shouted orders, and one man who had saved his life at the cost of his own future. A man whose name he never forgot. The ceremony continued, unaware that something profound was unfolding. Daniel sat back down, embarrassed that he had stood out even for a second. He pulled his sleeve lower, hiding the tattoo the way he always did. It was a reminder of a past he rarely spoke about, a past that began before Lucas was born, before his wife died, before life narrowed into survival. When Captain Hale finally stepped up to the podium, he adjusted the microphone and began his speech. His words were steady at first, practiced. But then his eyes drifted again to the back of the room. His voice faltered. "Today," he said slowly, "we honor not just the graduates on this stage, but the sacrifices that brought them here." He paused, swallowing hard. "Sometimes," he continued, "the greatest heroes are not the ones wearing medals or standing in the spotlight." A murmur rippled through the audience. Captain Hale stepped away from the podium. And then, to everyone's confusion, he walked down the steps and toward the back of the auditorium. Daniel felt a sudden hush fall around him. He looked up, startled, as the Navy captain stopped right in front of him. For a moment, neither man spoke. Then Captain Hale's eyes filled with tears. "Is that the Phoenix Battalion?" he asked softly, pointing to the tattoo. Daniel froze. He hadn't heard that name spoken aloud in years. His throat tightened as he nodded once. "I thought I was the last one who remembered," Daniel said quietly. Captain Hale's composure broke. Tears streamed down his face as he stood at attention and saluted. The room erupted into shocked whispers. "You saved my life," Captain Hale said, his voice shaking. "You carried me out when the convoy was hit. You went back when everyone else thought it was over." Daniel's hands trembled. "We were just doing our job," he replied. "That's what brothers do." Captain Hale turned to the audience, his voice loud now, full of emotion. This man was my brother in war. He was offered honors, recognition, but he chose to come home and raise his son alone after losing everything. Lucas, standing with the graduates, stared in disbelief. He had never seen his father like this. Never heard this story. Never imagined that the quiet man who cleaned floors had once been a soldier others called a hero. Captain Hale placed a hand on Daniel's shoulder. "You didn't just raise a graduate," he said. "You raised a man." Lucas felt his chest tighten as tears spilled freely. For the first time, he saw his father not just as a provider, but as someone who had endured more than he ever knew, and still chose kindness, humility, and love. The applause that followed was unlike anything the auditorium had heard that day. People stood. Some cried. Some clapped until their hands hurt. Daniel stood there, overwhelmed, wishing his late wife could see this moment, wishing he could tell her that their son had made it. Later, as families gathered for photos, Lucas hugged his father tighter than he ever had before. "Why didn't you tell me?" he whispered. Daniel smiled sadly. "Because I wanted you to be proud of who you are, not who I was."